Hello, this is Guy Glidden, and the purpose of this screencast is to provide you with an overview of the writing requirements for this course and for other courses in this graduate program. So in order to make sense of this, you're probably going to want to also pull up and make a copy of the APA 6th edition guidelines as provided as the Newman University Graduate Education Program Expectations. This is a 2 or 3 page abbreviated document, and so you'll want to have that as your source. I would keep it with you all the time, make reference to it on a regular basis, either electronically or in a printed version. The source document for this, the primary source document of this is the Publication Manual of the American Psychological Association, 6th edition. This is simply the most recent edition. As a point of note, when this individual was a graduate student in the 1960s, I actually used and have a copy of the first edition. So if you ever want to know that if there is a first edition, I have a copy of it. Let's move forward here. Here are the topics that are going to be covered in the brief document that is being made available to you on the program expectations for a graduate education program. So you're going to get information about page format, headings, sections of the paper, writing skills and mechanics, word choice, in-text citations and references. Okay, I'm going to present those out. Now in a moment I'm going to go over a couple things that I think are probably the most important in this aspect, but I simply want you to get a version. So again, if you haven't done so, take a few minutes, take a look at that. You have the document at your access, so you have the source material that you need to use. And I might add, this is going to be brought a guide that we will use as a basis for the papers, and the relative importance of that stuff is something I'm going to be discussing in the rest of this paper. Now, why do we use a APA writing style requirement guide? Well, 4 quick reasons if you haven't figured this out already. Number 1, inconsistency improves communication. So if there's a consistent style, it's going to improve the accuracy of communication. And in technical writing, accuracy at technical levels is really important. Secondly, and I think this is really critical, that the APA writing style provides protections and expectations for using the ideas and work of others. This is really critical in our society. We believe very strongly in patent rights, copyright protection, support for ideas. And when someone writes a research paper, they're offering their ideas and their format to others. Now, it doesn't mean you can't use many of these ideas as you're writing subsequent papers, but you always means err on the side of caution, always need to give the appropriate references and credit to individuals whose ideas and work you're using. Real problem if you put something out there and you don't provide these references so that people know where you're going. And a part of this is obviously to protect those ideas of other people, but also it's important in research to deal with what we call transparency of sources. If I'm doing a research project, I need to be able to trace back into the ideas where research ideas come from. I need to go back to the source, the beginning of the ideas. And if you're writing the paper, or if I'm reading a paper by somebody else, the accuracy of their information and providing clear ideas about citations and references is really critical. And finally, part of this is the integrity is the basis of research credibility. If you're doing research, the main ingredient you have on your side is credibility as a researcher, your integrity. If you lose your integrity, it's pretty hard to get it back in this area. And so we want to make sure that it doesn't happen on the front end by simply, and one way to lose it is to present ideas as your own, and they're not your own. So err on the side of caution. Make sure you use these guidelines very carefully, and particularly with reference to making citations and reference and protecting the ideas of others. Now, a comparison here. The document we're using as a basis is a 2-page or 3-page, I can't remember exactly which, but it's very brief, Cliff Notes version of the guidelines. Now, do not mistake that for the real thing. These are based on a very complete, multi-phase scholarly publication called the Publication Manual of the APA, American Psychological Association. As I told you earlier, the current version is the 6th edition. This is a 400-page publication. It's very detailed. It has multiple cross-references. Really important is it has details, examples, it illustrates everything, and especially detailed examples of writing style. Writing style is important in research because you basically are trying to keep the emphasis off your writing style and putting the emphasis on the ideas and the concepts you're trying to communicate. So if this makes sense to you, you need to write in the third person, not the first person. And you need to make sure that your references are very clear. And you need to make sure that in all examples of your language, that anything that would show your bias as a researcher is removed from the publication. So if I'm reading a research article about an individual, I know that individual may have strong ideas about the idea they're doing research on, but I need to see clearly that there's a firewall between that person's ideas and the research that they're doing. So writing style, clarity of resources, in other words, the stuff that you're going to get from the APA publication manual is really critically important. For your purposes of this course, I suspect that you're going to do very nicely with the Cliff Notes version, the one we're providing to you. But just be aware, there is a document back there behind it, and you may need to resource that someday, so don't be afraid to do that. Now let me go into some examples and some illustrations of the things that I think are important, because the APA style has very specific expectations for things that we're talking about things like periodicals, non-periodicals, in other words, a chapter in a book, a segment in a guideline that's not dated as a periodical, a special instance for a book chapter that's part of a non-periodical, and then you have the same thing for online periodicals and online documents. It's very important you read this stuff, particularly on online references, because most of you are going to be looking at lots and lots of examples of research articles that were originally provided in a paper document like a periodical, but are now available as an online version. So read the notes carefully and make sure you're referencing those correctly. So for example, here would be an example of a periodical reference. Author, initials, author, second author, if one so, how many articles, the date of the publication, title of the article, title of the periodical, and then we need to give any references. In other words, we need to be able to give whatever information on that periodical you would need to find it. Date, edition number, in other words, the reference information that will lead us to where you're going to go. Non-periodical, again, pretty straightforward. You probably get it off the back of a checkbook, off of the book cover, the book jacket. But again, authors, identification, dates, critically important, title of the work, location, publisher. So again, the same thing you need to do there. You need to be very careful about that process. Okay, moving on here. See, we've got the same thing for a non-periodical. We've got specific, here's an example here. And then we go on to looking at an online periodical. Now notice the difference here. We have the same information we had before for the periodical information, the author's names, the title of the article, the date of the publication, title of the periodical, references that you're going to find on the jacket cover of the periodical, which could be a volume number, an edition number, or simply a dating. And then you need to put down that when you retrieved it. So I retrieved that on da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and from the source. And the source is going to be that very complicated language trail that you're going to find at the top of your screen when you're looking at something on your computer screen. Same thing here. So again, notice that in each cases here, your tagline on the bottom of your references for things you're submitting to me are going to tell me very quickly, number one, did I get this online or did I not get this online? That's critical, because if that stuff, and one of the main things is, I want to be able to find your articles. So the answer to that is, if you're making reference to an article, I don't need you to send me the article with your critique. That's not necessary at all. You simply need to make sure that you've given me the reference information so I can find it. If I can't find it, we got a problem. We're going to be talking. Okay, here's an example that I had from a paper, and I'm just going to give you 3 examples here. This person did not use an APA reference form, but there was enough to find it. So I simply took that information, put the author's name in, what the name of the article is, and I located it. So that the person didn't follow the rules, I was able to find it, so at least it didn't follow the guidelines. Probably get a knock on that, but it didn't handicap me from doing the research. Okay, I found this one, but I was lucky. Okay, because there are lots of references that you struggling readers with emotional behavior disorders could lead me to several different sources. So there's an example of something I found, but I was lucky because there were several options there. Okay, person gave me this on an item, gave me the information about that, and all they gave me on the tagline at the bottom was the address for Jumpstart. Well, Jumpstart's an organization. Now, Jumpstart probably was the organization that supported the publication, but it simply going to their website didn't help me. So there had to be something added at the end of that so I could find the details. That wasn't sufficient to help me out. And finally, here's another example here. So I'm providing several examples and illustrations. Well, this should give you a little bit of a clue that when we go back up here to the top here in the process here, the things that I'm really interested in is information that's going to be the focus right here when we're talking about providing references that deal with protection and expectations in using the work of others, and also transparency of source information. Now, am I going to give you major marks down in this course if rather than a 1-inch margin, you have a margin that's slightly more or slightly less than 1 inch? Probably not. If it's enough to detract from the publication you're providing, it might be a problem, but it probably won't. Will it be a major concern of mine if you turn in a work that's written in a nice style but doesn't include appropriate citations and references? Yeah, I would be really troubled by that. So that'll give you a little more ideas, but just be suffice to know there is a publication out there and you need to use it as a basis for writing in this course and in this program. Thank you very much.